Arizona Territory, 1886. The journey to Coyote Wells had been punishing. 6 days of rattling wagon travel across the desert had left Martha Lynch's throat parched and her spirits dampened. The children, William, 10, and Sarah, 7, had stopped complaining about the heat days ago, a silence Martha found more concerning than their earlier protests. James steered their wagon through the narrow canyon, his shoulders hunched forward in determination. "There it is," he said finally, pointing to a cluster of adobe and wooden structures in the distance. "Coyote Wells, our new beginning." Martha squinted at the settlement nestled against red cliffs. Perhaps 40 buildings in total, with a small church steeple visible against the dusty horizon. The discovery of silver in the nearby mountains had transformed what had once been a simple way station into a proper frontier town. "Is that our house, Pa?" William pointed to the outskirts where several newer-looking structures stood. "That's right, son, courtesy of the Sunset Mining Company. They need a new assayer, and we need a fresh start." Martha studied her husband's profile. After the bank took their farm in Missouri, James had grown distant, drinking too much and talking too little. This position in Arizona represented hope, a chance to rebuild what they had lost. As they approached the town, Martha noted several abandoned buildings. Strange for a supposedly booming mining settlement. A lone figure stood in front of the general store, watching their approach with unusual intensity. "Welcome to Coyote Wells," the man called as they drew closer. He was tall and gaunt, with deeply lined skin that spoke of years under the harsh desert sun. "Name's Harlan Weaver. I run the general store." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "James Lynch," her husband replied, extending a hand. "This is my wife Martha and our children, William and Sarah. I'm the new assayer for Sunset Mining." Something flashed across Weaver's face: concern. "Pity, of course. We've been expecting you." His eyes lingered on the children. "The company house is just past the church. Been vacant a while. Might need some attention." "Vacant?" James frowned. "What happened to the previous assayer?" Weaver's expression tightened. "That right," a sudden left rather suddenly. 4 months ago now. Why did they leave?" Martha asked. Weaver glanced around before answering. "Folks have their reasons for coming and going in these parts. Mrs. Lynch, desert life isn't for everyone." He nodded toward a barrel outside his store. "You'll want to fill your canteens. Town well's been running low lately. Everyone's on rations." As James helped the children down from the wagon, Martha noticed a weathered woman watching from across the street, clutching something to her chest. When their eyes met, the woman hurriedly retreated inside a building. "The house has its own well, doesn't it?" James asked, frowning. "It does," Weaver confirmed, but his tone was oddly hesitant. "Though you might want to have it tested before ... Before what?" Martha prompted when he didn't continue. Weaver forced another smile. "Before you settle in. Just to be sure it's not brackish. Desert water can be tricky." As they prepared to continue toward their new home, Martha noticed something tucked into the dirt near the store's entrance. A child's doll, its fabric stained and weathered. Sarah spotted it too. "Look, Mama." Her daughter rushed toward the toy. "Leave that be," Weaver snapped with unexpected sharpness. Then, softening his tone, "Sorry, little miss. That belongs to someone else." On their way to the house, Martha counted 12 buildings with boarded windows. For a silver boomtown, Coyote Wells had an unsettling number of vacant homes. "James," she whispered as they approached their new house, "something doesn't feel right here." Her husband's jaw tightened. "We've nowhere else to go, Martha. This is our chance. Our only chance." The company house stood alone at the edge of town, a 2-story wooden structure with a deep porch and peeling paint. Behind it, a wooden windmill creaked in the hot breeze, its blades turning lazily above the well that would supply their water. Martha felt a chill despite the heat. In the dust near the front steps, she could make out small footprints, children's footprints leading away from the house and into the desert beyond. The interior of the Lynch's new home carried the distinct feeling of hasty abandonment. Furniture remained positioned as if the previous occupants had simply walked out mid-activity, a half-finished letter on the desk. Children's toys scattered across the parlor floor, dishes stacked in the kitchen sink. "They certainly left in a hurry," Martha murmured, running her finger through a thick layer of dust on the dining table. "For months," Mr. Weaver said. James was examining the letter on the desk. "It's addressed to a Mrs. Eleanor Thompson in St. Louis," he said. It seems the previous assayer was writing to his mother. "What does it say?" Martha asked, moving to join him. James frowned. "Nothing of consequence. Weather complaints, mention of the children's health... He folded the letter and tucked it into his pocket. "I'll post it for them if we learn where they've gone." As Martha began the task of making the house livable, she sent the children to explore the backyard. Through the kitchen window, she watched them investigate the well. The wooden structure appeared solid enough with a hand pump mounted on a concrete foundation. William worked the pump handle while Sarah held a tin cup beneath it. After several pumps, water splashed into the cup clear at first glance. But when Sarah brought it to the window for Martha's inspection, she noticed an unusual yellowish tint. Perhaps it just needs to run a bit, James suggested when she showed him. Wells get stagnant without use. That evening, Martha boiled potatoes in well water for dinner. The water's strange color disappeared with boiling, but she couldn't shake her unease. The children were unusually quiet as they ate, even Sarah, who typically chattered endlessly. "What's troubling you, little one?" Martha asked, touching her daughter's forehead to check for fever. Sarah glanced at the water pitcher on the table. "The lady told me not to drink it." Martha exchanged a concerned look with James. "What lady, Sarah?" "The one in our bedroom. She was sitting on my bed when I went to get Dolly." Sarah continued eating as if she'd said nothing unusual. James chuckled nervously. "Your imagination is working overtime, Pumpkin. You're just tired from the journey." Later, as Martha prepared the children for bed in the small room they would share, she found scratches on the inside of the door, long, frantic marks that couldn't have been made by a child. "William," she asked carefully, "did you see anyone in the house today?" Her son looked up from his book, expression serious. "No, ma'am, but I heard someone—" "Heard what?" "Crying. Coming from inside the well." Martha sat heavily on the edge of the bed. "That was probably just the wind or the wood creaking." William shook his head firmly. "It was crying, Mama. Like a baby." That night, Martha woke to the sound of the pump handle creaking rhythmically in the yard. James slept soundly beside her, but the noise continued. Up, down, someone was drawing water in the darkness. When she gathered her courage to approach the window, the moonlight revealed the yard was empty. Yet the pump handle continued to move on its own, water gushing into an invisible container. By morning, mud had pooled beneath the pump, but no footprints marked the soft earth. James departed early for the assay office, eager to begin work. Martha occupied herself with cleaning, trying to transform the abandoned house into their home. In the main bedroom closet, she discovered women's clothing, presumably Mrs. Thompson's, still hanging neatly. Beneath them, a leather-bound journal had fallen against the wall. Martha hesitated only briefly before opening it. The journal belonged to Catherine Thompson, and the final entry was dated March 17, 1886. "The children are worse today. The doctor insists it's just desert fever, but I know better. It's the water. Samuel won't listen. Claims the mine depends on his findings regardless of what's happening. But I've seen what flows into our well from the mine tailings. Yellow-tinged and smelling of metal. The children's teeth are darkening. Their gums bleed. Last night, Emma couldn't remember her own name. We're leaving tomorrow, whatever Samuel says. I've arranged for the stage to St. Louis. If anyone finds this, please heed my warning. Don't trust the water. For God's sake, don't trust the water." Martha closed the journal with trembling hands and hid it in her sewing basket. When she checked on the children, she found Sarah sitting motionless by the window, staring at the well. "Sarah, honey." Her daughter turned slowly, her usual animation absent. "They're still down there, Mama," she whispered. "The Thompson children. The water took them." Outside, the windmill blades creaked in the hot Arizona wind. The change in William began on the third day. Martha noticed it at breakfast. Her normally energetic son sat listlessly at the table, his food untouched. When she placed a hand on his forehead, his skin felt cool and clammy. "I don't feel good, Ma," he mumbled. "My teeth hurt." Martha gently tilted his head back. "Open your mouth. Let me see." William's gums were swollen with an alarming grayish tint. When he ran his tongue over his front teeth, a small smear of blood appeared on his lip. "James," Martha called, her voice tight with worry. Her husband appeared from the study where he'd been reviewing mining reports. "We need to fetch the doctor for William." James frowned. "The company doctor won't make rounds until Friday." "This can't wait until Friday." Martha lowered her voice. "I found Catherine Thompson's journal yesterday. Their children fell ill before they left." She blamed the water from the well. James's expression hardened. "You shouldn't be snooping through other people's belongings, Martha. Did you hear me? Their children were sick just like William is now." "It's probably just a toothache," James insisted, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "Or adjustment to the desert climate. I can't go running for the doctor on our first week here over a child's complaint. What would the company think?" Martha stared at her husband in disbelief. "I don't care what the company thinks. Our son is ill, and what would you have us do if I lose this position?" James hissed. "Return to Missouri with nothing? Sleep in the wagon while I beg for work?" He softened slightly at Martha's expression. "I'll ask about the doctor when I'm at the office today. For now, have the children drink the water we brought from town." After James left, Martha filled a basin with the remaining water from their travel barrels and bathed William's face. Sarah sat nearby, unusually subdued, watching her brother with solemn eyes. The Thompson children got sick too, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Emma and Jack. They drank the water even when their mama told them not to. Martha's hands stilled. Sarah, how do you know their names? Emma told me. She comes at night. A knock at the front door interrupted them. Martha found Harlan Weaver on the porch, holding a basket covered with a checkered cloth. Mrs. Lynch, he greeted her, removing his hat. My wife thought you might appreciate some fresh biscuits and preserves, being new to town. That's very kind, Martha said, accepting the basket. Would you like to come in for coffee? Weaver's eyes darted past her to the interior of the house. No, thank you, I can't stay, he hesitated. How are you finding the house, and the children, are they well? Something in his tone made Martha pause. William seems to be coming down with something. His gums are swollen and bleeding a bit. Weaver's expression grew grave. Mrs. Lynch, I think it would be best if your family stayed with us in town for a few days until you can arrange what, Mr. Weaver? He lowered his voice. To leave Coyote Wells. This place isn't safe for children because of the water, Martha pressed. Weaver glanced nervously at the well. The mine's been dumping waste into Coyote Creek for years. It seeps into the groundwater. The company knows, but the silver's too valuable for them to care about a few sick miners or their families. The Thompsons only. Samuel and Catherine made it to the stage station, Weaver said grimly. The children died on the way. Poised most likely, though the company doctor called it desert fever. 9 children in Coyote Wells died last spring. It's 3 families left, but most miners can't afford to. They just ... double quotes, his voice dropped to a whisper, bury their young and try again. Martha felt a chill despite the afternoon heat. Why are you telling me this now? Why not when we arrived? The company has ears everywhere. My wife insisted I come. Said a mother ought to know what she's facing. He stepped back from the door. Tsk, don't use that well, Mrs. Lynch. Not for anything. After Weaver left, Martha rushed to check on William. His condition had worsened, his face pale and drawn, his breathing shallow. Sarah sat beside him, stroking his hair and humming tunelessly. They're coming to take him, Sarah said without looking up. Who is? Martha asked, her heart racing. The children in the well. They're lonely down there, that evening. When James returned from the assay office, he found Martha packing their trunks, her movements frantic. What are you doing? He demanded. We're leaving, James, tonight. William's worse, and I won't stay in this place another day. This is madness. James grabbed the clothing from her hands. We have nowhere to go, no money for travel. The water is poisoned, Martha cried. The mine is dumping waste that's seeping into the wells. The Thompson children died from it. Mr. Weaver told me everything. James's face flushed with anger. Weaver has interests in a competing mine. He's trying to drive Sunset out of business with these rumors. These aren't rumors, Martha insisted. Look at your son. James stormed to William's room. The boy lay motionless on the bed, his face waxen, dark circles under his eyes. When James touched his son's face, William's eyes fluttered open, the whites now tinged with yellow. Pa, William whispered. I hear them calling me. From the well. Outside, the windmill began to turn faster, the wooden blades creaking and groaning, though no wind stirred the heavy evening air. Night fell over Coyote Wells, bringing no relief from the day's heat. Martha bathed William's face with damp cloths, desperately trying to break his fever. The boy drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling about voices in the water, children calling his name. James paced the bedroom, his earlier confidence shattered by the sight of his son's deterioration. I'll ride for the doctor, he finally announced. The company man in town said he's at a ranch 15 miles east. If I leave now, I might bring him back by morning. Be careful, Martha said, relief washing over her. And James, bring back clean water. After her husband departed, Martha continued her vigil beside William. Sarah curled at the foot of the bed, watching her brother with unnervingly adult concern. Mama, Sarah whispered suddenly. Someone's at the well. Martha moved to the window. Caught in the silver moonlight, she could make out a small figure standing by the well, a child in a white nightgown, hair hanging loose down her back. The figure worked the pump handle, then bent to catch the water in cupped hands. Stay here with your brother, Martha instructed, her mouth dry with fear. She descended the stairs and stepped onto the back porch, keeping her voice steady as she called, Hello there, are you lost? The child straightened, but didn't turn around. Martha cautiously approached, the hard-packed earth cooled beneath her feet. When she was within a few yards, the child finally turned. Martha gasped. The girl was perhaps 10 years old, with sunken cheeks and dark circles beneath her eyes. But most disturbing was her mouth-black gums visible behind cracked lips, teeth discolored to a sickly brown. You must be Mrs. Lynch, the girl said, her voice eerily adult. I'm Emma Thompson. I lived here before you. Martha fought the urge to flee. Emma Thompson died months ago, she whispered. The girl smiled, revealing more blackened teeth. Did I? I don't remember dying. I just remember the thirst. She held out her cupped hands, still full of water despite the impossibility of it not having leaked through her fingers. Would you like a drink, Mrs. Lynch? The water isn't so bad once you get used to it. Martha backed away. You're not real. You can't be real. I'm as real as the poison in your son's blood, Emma replied. As real as the silver that's worth more than children's lives. She tilted her head, listening. They're coming now. The others want to meet your children. From the well emerged a sound Martha had prayed was just her imagination, the faint cries of children rising up from the depths. Martha ran back to the house, bolting the door behind her. She rushed upstairs to find William's bed empty and Sarah gone. Panic seized her as she searched the upper floor, calling her children's names with increasing desperation. A floorboard creaked in the attic above. Martha grabbed a lamp and climbed the narrow stairs, pushing open the hatch to reveal a small, dusty space with a single window. There, silhouetted against the moonlight, stood Sarah, holding William's limp hand. Her son stood unnaturally straight, his eyes vacant, gums bleeding freely now. Sarah, come away from there, Martha pleaded. Bring William and come to Mama. We can't, Sarah replied calmly. Emma says we belong to the well now. All the children do. That's nonsense. Martha moved closer, reaching for her children. You belong with me and your father. The water's already inside us, William said, his voice as hollow as his eyes. Can't you feel it inside you too, Mama? From the potatoes? From the coffee? It's too late. Martha's blood ran cold as she realized the truth. She had cooked with the well water, had made coffee for herself and James, had consumed the poison without realizing. Outside, a chorus of childish voices rose from the yard, singing an eerie, discordant lullaby. William and Sarah turned toward the window in unison. They're calling us Mama, Sarah said. We have to go to them now. Martha lunged forward, grabbing both children and pulling them close. No, I won't let them take you. William struggled weakly against her, but Sarah remained still, her small body unnaturally rigid in Martha's embrace. It hurts less in the water, she whispered. Emma promised. The singing outside grew louder, accompanied now by the rhythmic creaking of the pump hand. Up, down, up, down. William's struggles ceased as he went limp in Martha's arms, his breathing shallow and labored. Martha dragged both children down to the master bedroom, laying William on the bed. She blocked the door with a heavy dresser, then used strips torn from the bed sheets to bind her children's hands, gently but firmly. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I have to keep you safe until your father returns. Sarah watched her with unnerving composure. It won't matter, Mama. The well water is patient. It waits in the ground for years and years. It can wait for us. Through the night, Martha kept vigil, listening to the ghostly chorus outside rise and fall. Sometime after midnight, William's fever broke, but the improvement brought no comfort. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and his breathing came in shallow gasps. Toward dawn, Martha herself began to feel strange. A metallic taste filled her mouth, and her gums grew tender when she probed them with her tongue. She thought of the coffee she had drunk, the vegetables she had washed in the poisoned water. The first light of morning brought the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Martha rushed to the window to see James returning alone without the doctor. His shoulders were slumped in defeat as he dismounted. James! She called from the window. Stay away from the well! He looked up, his face haggard from the night ride. The doctor wouldn't come, he called back. Said he doesn't treat mining town fever anymore. Not after last spring. As James approached the house, Martha noticed Emma Thompson standing by the well again, watching her husband with hollow eyes. Other children emerged from the shadows, 5, then 7, then more, forming a silent ring around the yard. James, run, Martha screamed. Don't come closer. But her husband seemed not to hear. He paused at the well, removing his hat to wipe sweat from his brow. His hand moved to the pump. No, Martha pounded on the glass. Don't touch the water. James hesitated, then turned toward the house with a puzzled expression. In that moment, small hands reached up from inside the well, pale fingers grasping the stone edge, pulling upward. A child's face appeared, then another and another, their features distorted by the poison that had claimed them. Martha ran for the stairs, desperate to reach her husband. Behind her, she heard the bed frame creak as William rose. Sarah's soft voice called after her, It's too late, Mama. The water always wins. On the landing, Martha stumbled, her vision blurring. The metallic taste in her mouth had intensified, and when she touched her lips, her fingers came away smeared with blood. The poison was working faster than she had realized. She reached the front door just as a scream erupted from outside. James's voice suddenly cut short. By the time Martha staggered onto the porch, her husband was nowhere to be seen. Only his hat remained, lying beside the well where the ghostly children had gathered. Martha collapsed to her knees as Sarah and William emerged from the house behind her. Her children's faces were serene despite their discolored skin and blackened gums. "Come with us, Mama," William said, extending his hand. "The water isn't so bad once you're part of it." As consciousness began to fade, Martha saw Harlan Weaver approaching on the road from town, his face grim with foreknowledge. In her final moments of clarity, she scratched a desperate warning in the dust of the porch. "Don't trust the water." Sarah took her right hand, William her left. Together, her children led Martha toward the well, where Emma Thompson waited with a patient smile, dark water dripping from her outstretched hands. Harlan Weaver stood before the town council of Coyote Wells, his weathered hands trembling as he placed a folded paper on the table. 2 weeks had passed since the disappearance of the Lynch family, and the company house stood empty once again, its doors locked from the inside. "I found this nailed to my store door this morning," Weaver explained, his voice rough with emotion. "It appears to be a letter written by Martha Lynch. Mayor Colton, a heavy-set man with financial ties to the Sunset Mining Company, regarded the paper with suspicion. And how would Mrs. S. Lynch deliver a letter when she and her family vanished without a trace? Their wagon is still in the stable. I can't explain it," Weaver admitted, "but it's her handwriting. Same as the note I found scratched on their porch." The mayor unfolded the paper with reluctance and began to read aloud. "To whoever finds this, by the time you read these words, my family and I will have joined the others in the well. The poison has worked its way into our blood just as it did with the Thompson children and all who came before them. I write this in a moment of clarity, though such moments grow shorter as the voices from the well grow louder. The Sunset Mining Company knows what its operations are doing to the water. The silver extraction process leaches mercury, arsenic, and other toxins into Coyote Creek, which feeds the groundwater beneath our homes. Our children die while the company profits from their silence." My William showed the first symptoms: bleeding gums, yellowed eyes, confusion. Sarah began to see the Thompson girl, Emma, who died on the way to the stage station. I thought it was childish imagination until I saw Emma myself standing by our well in the moonlight. Those who die from the poisoned water don't leave Coyote Wells. They remain, bound to the contaminated ground, thirsting eternally. They call to the living, especially the children, promising relief from the pain the poison causes. James refused to believe until it was too late. He went for the doctor, but returned changed. I watched from the window as the children from the well took him. Now they wait for me and my children to join them. I can feel the poison working inside me. My thoughts scatter like desert sand in the wind. The children, my children, watch me write this with patient eyes. They say it won't hurt once we surrender to the water. For the love of God, whoever finds this, expose what Sunset Mining has done. Stop them before more children join the chorus in the well. And if you value your life and the lives of those you love, heed this warning. Don't trust the water. Don't trust the water. Don't trust the water. Silence fell over the town council as Mayor Colton finished reading. Outside, the desert wind picked up, whistling through the boardwalk cracks. Clearly the ramblings of a woman driven mad by desert isolation, the mayor finally declared. Probably took the children and fled in the night, leaving this nonsense to absolve themselves of abandoning contracted employment. Then explain the locked doors, Weaver challenged. Explain the half-eaten breakfast still on their table. Explain the 9 children we buried last spring, all with the same symptoms. Tobias Reed, the company physician, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Desert fever is common in these parts, Mr. Weaver. Children are particularly susceptible. Desert fever doesn't blacken teeth and gums, Weaver retorted. Doesn't cause yellow eyes or bleeding from the ears. You know what's happening here, doctor? You've falsified enough death certificates. The doctor paled. I've done my duty as the company requires. Your duty? Weaver's voice rose. Tell that to the Lynch children. Tell it to the Thompsons, the Millers, the Sandersons, all. Those families who lost children while you reported natural causes. That's enough, Weaver, the mayor warned. These accusations border on slander. It's not slander if it's true, a new voice interjected. Eliza Parker stood in the doorway, her face drawn with grief. 6 months earlier, she had buried 2 young daughters within a week of each other. My Abigail and Josephine died with blood in their mouths from water you all knew was poisoned. Other townspeople had gathered behind Mrs. Parker, miners and shopkeepers, wives and widows, all bearing the hollow-eyed look of those who had lost children to the contaminated water. The Lynch letter isn't the first warning, Eliza continued. After the Thompsons lost their children, Catherine Thompson left a journal. I found it hidden in my store after they fled. It contained water samples and documentation of the children's symptoms. I sent it to the territorial governor 3 weeks ago. The mayor's face darkened with anger. You had no right. We had every right. Weaver slammed his fist on the table. This company is killing our children while you line your pockets with blood money. As arguments erupted among the council members, no one noticed the small puddle forming beneath the door water seeping in from outside, though no rain had fallen. A child's soft laughter echoed from the street, nearly inaudible beneath the shouting. By the time territorial inspectors arrived in Coyote Wells 2 weeks later, responding to Catherine Thompson's journal and Martha Lynch's letter, they found the town council chamber empty, the doors locked from inside. Water stained the floorboards despite the desert drought, and on the wall, scratched into the wood paneling, was a single phrase repeated dozens of times: "Don't trust the water." The territorial inspector's report of October 1886 provided the first official documentation of the Coyote Wells tragedy. Jeremiah Harding, appointed by the governor to investigate the allegations against Sunset Mining Company, arrived with a small contingent of men to find a town in the final stages of desertion. Storefronts stood empty, doors swinging in the hot wind. Houses had been abandoned with possessions still in place, clothes hanging in wardrobes, dishes stacked in kitchen cupboards, toys scattered across dusty floors. Only a handful of residents remained, most too ill to travel or too poor to start again elsewhere. "The water killed this town," croaked Samuel Jenkins, one of the few miners who agreed to speak with Harding's team. His skin had a yellowish tint, and his teeth were visibly decayed. "First it took our children, then it came for the rest of us." Jenkins led the inspectors to the town's main well near the church. The ground around it was stained a peculiar rusty color, and the water that emerged from the pump had a distinctive metallic smell. "Testing confirms high levels of mercury, arsenic, and lead," wrote Dr. Marcus Whitfield in his accompanying medical report, "consistent with mine tailings and ore processing waste. The contamination appears to have spread throughout the groundwater table beneath Coyote Wells. Wells nearest to Coyote Creek show the highest concentration of toxins." Harding's team collected samples from various water sources, including the now-abandoned company house where the Lynch family had disappeared. There they discovered the most disturbing evidence: children's footprints in dried mud around the well, both approaching and leading away, yet none returning to the house. "Local superstition has transformed this tragedy into something darker," Harding noted in his journal. "The remaining residents speak of ghost children luring the living into contaminated wells. While such tales are clearly the product of grief and frontier isolation, they speak to the very real horror that unfolded here: children dying, painful deaths while the mining company concealed the danger." The investigation quickly uncovered internal Sunset Mining Company documents revealing their awareness of the contamination dating back to 1884. A memo from company headquarters instructed the local manager to minimize discussion of water quality concerns and attribute any illness to common desert ailments rather than company operations. Most damning was a letter from the company physician, Dr. Tobias Reed, requesting transfer after documenting 17 child deaths in a single year. "I can no longer in good conscience falsify these death certificates. The symptoms of heavy metal poisoning are unmistakable, and the company's refusal to alter their waste disposal practices amounts to negligent homicide." As Harding's investigation progressed, a pattern emerged in the disappearances. The Lynch family wasn't the first to vanish entirely. 3 other families had similarly disappeared over the preceding 18 months, all after losing children to illness. In each case, the houses were found locked from inside with no sign of how the occupants had left. "We tried to warn the Lynch family when they arrived," Samuel Jenkins told Harding, "but the company intercepts telegrams and monitors the stage. They wanted fresh workers who didn't know the danger." On the 3rd day of the investigation, Harding's team discovered the town records locked in Mayor Colton's abandoned office. The death registry confirmed 32 child deaths between 1884 and 1886, all attributed to desert fever or natural causes. Cross-checking against company employment records revealed a disturbing correlation. Families who complained about water quality were promptly terminated and evicted. That evening, as Harding was transcribing his notes in the abandoned schoolhouse where his team had established temporary quarters, he was interrupted by a commotion outside. Several of his men were gathered around the town well, using lanterns to illuminate something in the water below. "We saw movement, sir," explained Deputy Marshal Fletcher. "Thought someone might have fallen in." Harding peered down into the darkness of the well shaft. At first he saw nothing but the distant gleam of water reflecting their lantern light. Then something moved, a pale shape beneath the surface, followed by another. "Lower the lantern," he instructed. As the light descended toward the water, Harding could make out what appeared to be pale faces looking up from beneath the surface: children's faces. their eyes wide open despite being underwater, their mouths moving as if singing a silent song. "Good God," Fletcher gasped beside him. Harding blinked and the vision vanished, only dark water remained, rippling slightly as if disturbed by something moving beneath. "A trick of the light," Harding declared firmly, though his voice trembled. "Reflections on the water surface." That night, several members of Harding's team reported hearing children's voices calling from outside their windows. By morning, Deputy Fletcher was missing, his bed empty, though the schoolhouse doors remained locked from inside. His journal contained a final entry: "They're singing by the well again. I must go to them." Harding ordered an immediate search, but Fletcher was never found. What they discovered instead, scratched into the hard earth near the main well, were the same words found in the town council chamber: "Don't trust the water." The territorial governor ordered the immediate closure of the Sunset mining operation, following Harding's preliminary report. The few remaining residents were evacuated and warnings were posted forbidding use of the wells. Plans were made to bring charges against the company executives for criminal negligence, resulting in multiple deaths. Yet the legal proceedings would never reach conclusion. A week after Harding's team departed Coyote Wells, a massive explosion destroyed the main shaft of the Sunset mine, collapsing the surrounding tunnels and altering the underground waterways. Company officials blamed disgruntled former employees, though no culprits were ever identified. The explosion had unexpected consequences. Within days, all wells in Coyote Wells ran dry, as if the water had suddenly receded deep into the earth. The town was officially abandoned in November 1886, deemed uninhabitable due to lack of water access. In his final report, Jeremiah Harding included a personal addendum that his superiors later removed from the official record. "I cannot explain what we witnessed at Coyote Wells in rational terms. The evidence of criminal negligence by the Sunset Mining Company is incontrovertible, as is the tragic toll of human life resulting from their actions. Yet something beyond scientific explanation occurred in that desert town, something that continues to haunt my dreams. On our final night in Coyote Wells, I was awakened by the sound of water dripping in the abandoned schoolroom. Following the sound, I discovered water seeping up through the floorboards, though the ground outside was parched and cracked from drought. In the puddles forming on the floor, I saw reflections that could not possibly have been cast by anything in that room: children in outdated clothing, their faces contorted by disease, their hands reaching upward as if trying to emerge from the water. Among them I recognized faces from the photographs we had collected during our investigation: the Thompson children, the Millers, the Sandersons, and three unfamiliar faces that I now believe belonged to the Lynch children and their mother. The territorial government will address the corporate malfeasance that poisoned the water of Coyote Wells, but I fear nothing can be done for those who were claimed by whatever dwells in those contaminated depths. Their fate belongs to the realm of the divine and the damned. Coyote Wells was never resettled. The buildings were gradually reclaimed by the desert, leaving only adobe walls and stone foundations as evidence of the town's existence. The mineshaft entrance was sealed by government order in 1888, and the surrounding land declared unsuitable for habitation. Yet travelers passing through the area occasionally report a strange phenomenon: the sound of a pump handle creaking in the wind, though no such structure remains standing, and the distant laughter of children playing, despite the ghost town being miles from any human settlement. Most disturbing are the accounts from those who have camped among the ruins and awakened in the night to find puddles of water inexplicably forming around them. Despite the arid climate, water with a yellowish tint and a metallic smell, seeping up through the parched earth like ghostly tears, and scratched into stone markers placed by territorial authorities, always appearing no matter how many times they are removed, are 7 words: "Don't trust the water, we are still here." Professor Elias Montgomery of Arizona State University regarded the collection of documents spread across his desk with growing unease. As a historian specializing in 19th century mining communities, he had investigated dozens of abandoned towns throughout the Southwest. But the Coyote Wells materials disturbed him in ways the others hadn't. "Are you certain these are authentic?" he asked his graduate assistant, Rachel Chun, who had discovered the papers in a previously uncatalogued archive from the territorial government. "The provenance is solid," Rachel confirmed. "They were part of Inspector Harding's personal effects, donated to the Historical Society after his death in 1912. His widow kept them separate from the official reports." She hesitated. "There's something else you should see." She unfolded a weathered map onto his desk, a survey of Coyote Wells and its surrounding area from 1890, 4 years after the town was abandoned. Red X marks dotted the landscape in a pattern radiating outward from the former mining site. "These marks correspond to water sources that tested positive for contamination," Rachel explained. But this is what's strange, the contamination continued to spread years after the mine closed, reaching water sources that had no geological connection to the original site. Montgomery frowned. That's not possible. Groundwater contamination follows predictable patterns based on the water table. Exactly, Rachel said. Yet according to these notes, the contamination spread as if it was moving deliberately. She pointed to a notation beside one of the marks. Third family lost. Same circumstances as Coyote Wells. Locked doors. No bodies. The professor removed his glasses, suddenly feeling the weight of his 70 years. What are you suggesting, Miss Chun? I'm not suggesting anything, Professor. I'm merely presenting the historical record. She placed another document before him, a yellowed photograph showing a well with several children standing around it. The children's faces were blurred as if they had moved during the long exposure. This was taken in 1891 at the Dawson Ranch, 15 miles from Coyote Wells. A week after this photograph, the Dawson family disappeared. The investigating sheriff reported finding the doors locked from inside and ... quotes. She consulted her notes. Water puddles throughout the house despite no rainfall for months. Montgomery studied the photograph, an inexplicable chill running through him despite the warmth of his office. This is all very interesting from a folkloric perspective, but hardly the basis for academic research. I thought the same. Until I found this. Rachel placed a final document on the desk, a modern water survey from the Arizona Department of Environmental Protection dated just 3 months earlier. They've been monitoring the old Coyote Wells area because the mining company wants to reopen operations using modern techniques. The survey shows trace contaminants matching the 19th century profile. But here's what's concerning. They're finding these contaminants in new wells drilled miles away from the original site, in areas that should be hydrologically isolated. Montgomery skimmed the report with growing concern. This still doesn't suggest anything supernatural. Ms. Chun, modern drilling could have created new channels for old contaminants to spread. I thought that too, Rachel admitted, until I spoke with Dr. Alvarez, who conducted the survey. She placed a recorded interview transcript on the desk. His team reported hearing children's voices near several of the test wells, and this photograph was taken by one of the environmental engineers. The modern digital image showed a concrete well cap at what appeared to be a test site. In the background, barely visible at the edge of the frame, stood what looked like a child in outdated clothing, their face an indistinct blur. Pareidolia, Montgomery declared. The human tendency to see faces and figures in random patterns. Combined with knowledge of the local legends, it's hardly surprising they saw ghost children. Rachel nodded respectfully. Of course, Professor. There's likely a rational explanation for everything in these files. She gathered the documents. Still, the mining company plans to begin operations next month. Given the historical record of contamination, perhaps we should forward these materials to the Environmental Protection Agency? Montgomery hesitated. Academic reputation was built on rational analysis, not ghost stories about poisoned wells. Yet the pattern documented in these papers was disturbing, regardless of how one interpreted it. I'll make some calls, he finally agreed. At minimum, the historical evidence of contamination warrants further environmental review before operations resume. After Rachel left, Montgomery found himself drawn to the window of his office, looking out toward the distant mountains where Coyote Wells had once stood. The summer monsoon was building on the horizon, dark clouds promising rare rain to the parched landscape. His office phone rang, startling him from his contemplation. Professor Montgomery, this is Richard Dawson from Horizon Mining. I understand you've been reviewing some historical materials related to our new project site. Montgomery frowned. How had they learned about Rachel's research so quickly? Yes, as a matter of academic interest. The original Sunset mining operation in that area had some concerning environmental impacts. Ancient history, Dawson dismissed. Our modern techniques bear no resemblance to 19th century methods. But I'd very much like to review the materials your assistant discovered. Perhaps we could meet? Something in the man's tone raised Montgomery's hackles. I'm afraid that won't be possible until we've completed our analysis. Academic integrity and all that. A pause. Professor Horizon Mining has been a generous supporter of university research. It would be unfortunate if that relationship became ... strained. Are you threatening to withdraw funding, Mr. Dawson? Not at all. I'm merely suggesting that mutually beneficial cooperation serves everyone's interests. Another pause. We've already acquired water rights throughout the region. Operations will proceed regardless of your historical curiosities. After ending the call, Montgomery sat heavily in his chair. Rachel's research had clearly touched a nerve with Horizon. Mining, perhaps there was more than academic interest at stake here. He returned to the photograph of the children around the well, studying their blurred faces. One figure in particular drew his attention. A girl in what appeared to be a white nightgown, her features more distinct than the others, though the image was faded and aged. He could make out an unsettling detail he hadn't noticed before. Her mouth was open as if calling to whoever was taking the photograph, and her teeth appeared blackened against her pale face. Outside, the first raindrops of the summer monsoon began to fall. Montgomery gathered the documents into his briefcase, determined to secure them in the university archive before making his concerns public. The mining company's interest only confirmed the significance of what Rachel had discovered. As he prepared to leave, he noticed a small puddle forming beneath his office door, water seeping in from the hallway despite the building's new roof and excellent drainage. The puddle expanded as he watched, the water carrying a faint yellowish tint that couldn't be explained by the building's copper pipes. Montgomery stepped back, Rachel's research suddenly feeling far less theoretical. From beyond the door came a sound that froze his blood, the soft laughter of children, followed by a rhythmic creaking like an old pump handle being worked. The water continued to seep inward, now forming distinct rivulets across his office's floor, moving with purpose toward where he stood. And in the spreading puddles, Montgomery caught reflections that shouldn't have been possible, small faces looking up at him from below, their eyes wide and pleading, their gums blackened by poison. As the water reached his shoes, Montgomery heard a clear voice, a child's voice, speaking as if from the bottom of a deep well. The water remembers what was done to us. The water never forgets. His phone rang again. When Montgomery answered with a trembling hand, Rachel's voice came through, tight with urgency. "Professor, I just received word Horizon Mining began drilling this morning. It's fast-tracking the operation before the environmental review. They've already hit the water table." Through his office window, Montgomery could see the storm intensifying, rain now falling in sheets across the campus. The meteorologist had predicted a record monsoon season with potential for flash flooding throughout the state, including at the old Coyote Wells site where the earth was being opened once again. "Rachel," Montgomery said, his voice steady despite his fear, "we need to warn them. The water remembers." Behind him, the puddle continued to spread, and within it, ghostly children's hands reached upward through what should have been merely a thin film of liquid on solid floor, reaching for him with determined patience, as they had reached for the Lynch family and all who came before and after. The voice spoke again from the water at his feet. "Don't trust the water. We are still here." The summer monsoon of 2018 was the heaviest Arizona had experienced in 50 years. Flash floods tore through desert washes. Ancient arroyos that had stood dry for decades suddenly raged with muddy water, and emergency services worked around the clock to rescue stranded motorists and evacuate low-lying communities. At the newly established Horizon Mining operation, the deluge created immediate problems. The drilling site, located 10 miles from where Coyote Wells once stood, quickly became a muddy quagmire. Water poured into freshly dug excavations and pooled around heavy equipment, halting operations less than a week after they began. Richard Dawson stood beneath a temporary shelter, watching with frustration as his multi-million-dollar investment disappeared beneath rising water. Rain hammered on the metal roof above him as he shouted into his cell phone, "I don't care what it takes. Get those pumps running and drain the main shaft. We're on a schedule here." Beside him, site manager Patrick Collins studied the rainfall radar on his tablet. "This isn't letting up anytime soon, sir. The forecast shows another 3 days of heavy precipitation. Maybe we should consider suspending operations until—" "Absolutely not," Dawson snapped. "We've already dealt with enough delays from those academic busybodies. The university's attempt to trigger an environmental review failed, and I won't let a little rain set us back now." Collins exchanged a glance with Elena Vasquez, the project's environmental compliance officer. Both had received copies of the historical documents. Professor Montgomery had submitted to the Environmental Protection Agency documents that detailed the contamination from the original Sunset mining operation and its deadly consequences. "The main shaft is showing unusual water pressure," Elena reported cautiously. "It's not just rainwater we're dealing with. The drilling appears to have tapped into a previously unknown aquifer." "Excellent," Dawson replied with unexpected enthusiasm. "Water rights in this region are almost as valuable as the minerals. We'll add them to our portfolio." "Sir," Elena continued, choosing her words carefully, "the water samples from this aquifer are showing concerning levels of heavy metals, mercury, arsenic, lead, consistent with the historical contamination pattern from the 1880s. Dawson's expression darkened. "Those reports are academic speculation based on territorial folklore, Ms. Vasquez. I expected better from our compliance team." The chemical analysis is current, not historical, Elena insisted, offering her tablet displaying the test results. This water isn't safe. And if these readings are accurate, the contamination has somehow remained concentrated rather than dispersing over time, which defies hydrological models. Before Dawson could respond, a shout came from the direction of the main shaft. A worker was running toward them through the downpour, his hard hat missing, and his face pale with shock. "Something's wrong at shaft 3. The man gasped when he reached them. "The pump. Something's blocking it." Collins immediately headed toward the shaft with the worker, while Dawson and Elena followed at a distance. The main excavation was now a dark pool, the industrial pumps laboring noisily at its edge. Workers gathered around, their expressions uneasy as they pointed at something in the water. "What the hell is that?" Collins demanded, shining his flashlight on the water's surface. Elena moved closer, then stepped back in horror. Floating in the murky water were what appeared to be children's toys, a wooden doll with a painted face, a small tin soldier, a leather ball, all in styles that hadn't been manufactured in over a century. "They're coming up through the pump outflow," one worker explained. Along with this, he held up a piece of waterlogged paper, the writing barely legible after its journey through the machinery. Elena carefully took the paper, her hands trembling as she made out the words. "Don't trust the water. We are still here." "This is some kind of sick joke," Dawson declared, snatching the paper from Elena's hands. "Probably those environmental protesters trying to spook us. Get back to work, all of you." As the workers reluctantly dispersed, Collins pulled Dawson and Elena aside. "Sir, I've been receiving strange reports from the night shift. They claim to hear children's voices around the shafts after dark." "Nonsense," Dawson scoffed. "Wind in the excavation pipes, nothing more." "3 workers have quit, sir," Collins continued. "And there's something else. Some of our people are showing symptoms. Bleeding gums, yellowed eyes, confusion. The site medic thinks it might be heavy metal poisoning, possibly from handling the water without proper protection." Elena inhaled sharply. "Those are the same symptoms described in the historical records," Dawson rounded on them both. "I've heard enough. This operation represents a $100 million investment. I won't have it derailed by ghost stories and coincidence." He pointed at the rain-lashed landscape around them. "We're surrounded by water right now. If there was deadly contamination present, we'd all be showing symptoms." As if in answer to his declaration, a worker near the main pump suddenly doubled over, retching violently. When he straightened, blood streamed from his mouth, staining his teeth and running down his chin in scarlet rivulets. "Get him to medical," Collins shouted, rushing to the man's aid. But as he approached, other workers began to show similar symptoms, clutching their stomachs, spitting blood, their faces contorting in pain. "What's happening to them?" Dawson demanded, his certainty finally shaken. Elena was already checking her tablet, reviewing water test results with growing alarm. "The contamination levels are increasing exponentially. It's as if the water itself is becoming more toxic by the minute." Around them, the rain intensified, turning the entire site into a lake of muddy water. The workers who hadn't fallen ill were retreating to vehicles, abandoning equipment in their haste to escape whatever was affecting their colleagues. As Collins helped the first affected worker toward the medical tent, he noticed something disturbing, small footprints appearing in the mud around them. Footprints too small to belong to any adult on site, materializing as if invisible children were walking among them. "We need to evacuate," Elena urged, gripping Dawson's arm. "Now. Whatever happened here in the 1880s isn't over." Before Dawson could respond, a series of sharp cracks echoed across the site as the heavy pumps began to fail, one after another. The main shaft, momentarily drained by their operation, began to refill at an impossible rate, water gushing upward as if under immense pressure from below. And with the water came objects, more antique toys, pieces of 19th century clothing. A child's shoe, a woman's hairbrush, all relics of Coyote Wells and its doomed inhabitants, preserved in whatever underground reservoir had held them for over a century. "My God," Dawson whispered, his arrogance finally giving way to fear. The last pump failed with a grinding shriek of metal, and in the sudden silence that followed, they heard it, children's voices singing a discordant lullaby seeming to rise from the water itself. The voices grew louder as the water continued to rise around them, now reaching their ankles despite standing on elevated ground. Collins returned, his face ashen. "The road's washed out. We're cut off until the storm passes." Elena's phone buzzed with an incoming text. She read it with widening eyes. "It's from Professor Montgomery. The EPA just issued an emergency order to cease all operations based on his historical evidence. They're sending a hazmat team." But with the roads flooded, double quotes, her voice trailed off as she noticed something in the rising water around their feet, pale, faces looking up from beneath the surface, child-sized hands reaching upward, mouths open in silent pleas or perhaps hungry anticipation. "You see them too?" Collins whispered, following her gaze. Elena nodded wordlessly, her scientific training failing to provide any rational explanation for what they were witnessing. Dawson backed away, shaking his head in denial even as blood began to trickle from his gums. "This isn't happening. It can't be happening." The singing grew louder, and with it came another sound, the rhythmic creaking of an old-fashioned water pump. Though no such equipment existed at the modern mining site, the sound seemed to come from the main shaft, where the water now swirled in an unnatural pattern, forming a whirlpool that defied the laws of fluid dynamics. At the center of the vortex, figures began to emerge, children in 19th century clothing. Their skin pallid, their eyes hollow, their teeth and gums blackened by poison. They rose from the water as if climbing invisible stairs, their movements jerky but purposeful. In their midst stood a woman in a blood-stained dress, her long hair plastered to her face by water. She held the hands of two children, a boy and a girl, their faces bearing the same marks of poisoning that had begun to appear on the ill workers. "Martha Lynch," Elena breathed, recognizing the woman from the historical photographs Rachel Chun had included in her research. The spectral woman raised her head, fixing her gaze directly on Dawson. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly despite the pounding rain. "The water remembers. The poison you put in the ground took our children, took our lives. And now you've come to do it again." Dawson stumbled backward, slipping in the mud. "This isn't real," he insisted, though blood now ran freely from his mouth. "Some kind of mass hallucination from chemical exposure." The ghost children began to move toward the living workers, gliding across the water's surface with unnatural grace. Wherever they passed, the water rose higher, following their movement as if drawn to them. "We tried to warn you," Martha Lynch continued, her voice echoing with inhuman resonance. "We've warned everyone who came after. But the living never listen until the water takes them too." Collins grabbed Elena's arm. "We need to reach higher ground. Now." As they retreated toward the temporary offices built on a slight rise, Elena saw workers falling to their knees in the rising water, their expressions shifting from pain to peaceful surrender as ghost children reached for their hands. The afflicted workers allowed themselves to be led toward the main shaft, walking willingly into the deepening whirlpool. "The water offered us relief from our suffering," Martha explained, her hollow eyes now fixed on Elena. "It promises the same to all who are poisoned by it. A release from pain, a joining with those already taken. This isn't about revenge," Elena realized, the academic mystery suddenly becoming clear. "It's about collection, gathering all who've been poisoned." "The water claims what rightfully belongs to it," Martha confirmed, "as it has for over a century." Dawson had reached his SUV, fumbling with the keys as blood dripped from his mouth onto his expensive suit. Before he could open the door, water began to seep into the vehicle, not from outside but from within, pooling on the seats and floor as if materializing from nowhere. From inside the SUV came the sound of children laughing. Dawson screamed, abandoning the vehicle to stagger back toward where Collins and Elena stood on the office steps. But the water around him suddenly deepened, rising to his waist in seconds, though it remained ankle-deep elsewhere. "Help me," he pleaded, reaching toward them. Small hands emerged from the water around him, dozens of them grasping his clothing, his arms, his legs. Dawson's scream cut off abruptly as he was pulled downward, disappearing beneath the surface with barely a ripple. He did not resurface. By nightfall, the rain had stopped, though water still covered the mining site. Of the 43 workers present when the phenomenon began, 31 had vanished beneath the water, primarily those who had shown symptoms of poisoning. The survivors, including Elena and Collins, had barricaded themselves in the highest building, watching in horror as ghostly children circled below, occasionally calling to them with promises of relief from suffering none yet felt. When rescue teams finally reached them 2 days later, the water had receded, leaving behind mud-caked equipment and no trace of the missing workers. No bodies were ever recovered from the main shaft, which investigators found had collapsed in on itself, sealing whatever lay below under tons of rock. The EPA's investigation confirmed extreme levels of historical contamination throughout the groundwater system, consistent with Professor Montgomery's research. Horizon Mining's permits were permanently revoked, and the area was designated a hazardous waste site, barred from future development. In the official report, the disappearances were attributed to flash flooding and toxic exposure causing disorientation. Elena Vasquez, however, submitted a separate personal account, sealed by court order and accessible only to those with specific clearance. In it, she detailed what she and the other survivors had witnessed, the ghost children, Martha Lynch's warnings, the water that moved with purpose and claimed those who had been poisoned by it. She included a final warning of her own. The contamination from Coyote Wells hasn't dissipated over time as hydrological models would predict. Instead, it appears to have developed a form of memory, carrying the suffering of its victims forward through the decades. The water remembers, and it collects what it believes belongs to it, those who have been poisoned by human greed and negligence. The mining operation has been halted, but the water remains beneath the ground, carrying its toxic memory through underground channels we've only begun to map. It waits, patient as the earth itself, for the next opportunity to rise. Should you encounter unexplained water in this region, water with a yellowish tint and metallic smell, water that appears where no water should be, water carrying the distant sound of children's voices, remember the warning that has echoed through nearly 150 years of tragedy. Don't trust the water. They are still there. Dr. Amara Jefferson stepped carefully around the puddle that had formed in the hallway outside. Her office at the Arizona Department of Water Resources. For the third time that week, maintenance had been called to address the mysterious leak, yet no source had been identified. The building was barely 5 years old, its water systems modern and well-maintained. "Still there, I see," remarked her colleague, Dr. Michael Chun, eyeing the puddle with suspicion. "Reminds me of my sister's research." Amara looked up sharply. "Your sister worked in hydrology?" Rachel was a historian, actually, specialized in mining communities. Michael's expression grew somber. She was consulting with the EPA during that Horizon mining disaster in 2018. "I remember that case," Amara said, unlocking her office door. "One of the worst environmental catastrophes in recent Arizona history. Wasn't there some controversy about workers who went missing during a flash flood?" Michael followed her inside, glancing back at the puddle with unease. Rachel believed there was more to it than the official report indicated. She was working on a book about Coyote Wells and what she called the waters. Memory when she died. Amara set her coffee on her desk, her interest piqued. As the department's lead hydrologist, she was intimately familiar with Arizona's complex water issues, but she'd never heard this particular theory. Water memory? Like the discredited homeopathy concept? "Something different," Michael replied, hesitating. "Look, it sounds crazy, but Rachel believed the contamination from the original Sunset mining operation had somehow changed the fundamental properties of the groundwater in that region, given it a kind of awareness." Amara would normally have dismissed such an idea immediately, but something in Michael's tone gave her pause. "What happened to your sister?" "Officially, she drowned in her bathtub. The investigation ruled it an accident." Michael's voice tightened, but Rachel was terrified of water. Had been ever since she began researching Coyote Wells. She wouldn't even wash dishes without wearing gloves. The idea that she would take a bath, Gongoats, he trailed off. "I'm so sorry," Amara said softly. When they found her, there was a message written on the bathroom mirror in water droplets. "Don't trust the water." Michael's hands trembled slightly. The investigators assumed she wrote it herself before accidentally drowning. "But I know my sister. She was trying to warn people, just like Martha Lynch did in 1886. Amara's professional skepticism warred with her sympathy for Michael's loss. "What does this have to do with our mysterious hallway puddle?" "Probably nothing," Michael admitted. But Rachel documented dozens of cases of unexplained water phenomena associated with the Coyote Wells contamination, water appearing in sealed rooms, moving against gravity, carrying objects from the original mining town. After her death, I continued tracking similar reports. He hesitated. "There's been a cluster of them in this area over the past month." Amara's phone rang before she could respond. The call was from the state governor's office, priority level urgent. She answered while gesturing for Michael to stay. "Dr. Jefferson, this is Governor Reyes. I need you at the Emergency Management Center immediately. We have a situation developing at Clearwater Reservoir." "What kind of situation?" Amara asked, already gathering her things. "The kind that involves water behaving in ways it shouldn't," the governor replied grimly. "The reservoir is draining, but we can't determine where the water's going. No breach in the dam, no increase in downstream flow. The water's simply disappearing." Michael's expression grew alarmed as he overheard the conversation. When Amara ended the call, he said, "Clearwater was built directly over the old aquifer that connected to Coyote Wells. Rachel mapped it in her research. That's a 20-mile hydrological connection that shouldn't still exist," Amara protested. "The geological surveys done before dam construction showed no active link to that system. Yet here we are," Michael replied quietly. "The water is moving again." 4 hours later, Amara stood at the edge of what should have been Arizona's third largest reservoir, but was now a rapidly emptying basin of mud and exposed lakebed. Emergency teams worked frantically to rescue stranded boats and wildlife as the water level dropped at an impossible rate, nearly 3 feet per hour, with no explanation. We've got every sensor and monitoring system operating, reported Chief Engineer Dawson, pointing to his tablet display. No structural failures, no underground channels large enough to accommodate this volume, no increased outflow at any monitoring station. It's as if the water is simply ceasing to exist, or moving somewhere we haven't identified, Amara corrected, studying the topographical map. Water doesn't vanish, transitions, or relocates. She pointed to an area southwest of the reservoir. What's located here? Quote, that's the old Horizon mining site, one of the technicians answered. Been abandoned since the disaster. It's a restricted hazardous zone now. Amara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. Has anyone been monitoring that area during this event? The team exchanged glances before Chief Dawson responded. It's not part of the reservoir system. Why would we? Before Amara could explain, her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Turn on the news. It's happening. She pulled up a local news livestream to find a helicopter view of the abandoned mining site, where there had been only desert and the remains of industrial equipment that morning. Water now covered the entire area, a new lake forming in real time, its surface unnaturally still despite the water's rapid appearance. That's 10 miles from the reservoir, Chief Dawson protested. There's no channel, no pipeline, nothing that could move water from here to there, especially not at this volume. I need to see it, Amara decided. Can we get a helicopter? 2 hours later, as darkness fell over the desert, Amara gazed down at the impossible lake that had formed around the abandoned mining site. Floodlights from emergency response vehicles illuminated the water's surface, which remained eerily calm despite the continued inflow from some unseen source. We're picking up extremely high concentrations of heavy metals in the water, reported the environmental technician who had accompanied her. Mercury, arsenic, leadol, consistent with the historical contamination profile from the original mining operation. But these levels are much higher than what was documented in 2018. It's concentrating, Amara murmured. Gathering. As the helicopter circled lowered, Amara noticed something that sent ice through her veins. The water wasn't uniformly distributed across the basin. Instead, it formed distinct patterns, almost like fingerprints or whorls, spiraling around the main shaft where the Horizon disaster had occurred. Can we get closer to the center? She requested. The pilot looked uncertain. The air above the water is showing some unusual thermal patterns. I'd rather not risk it after dark. Just one pass, Amara insisted. There's something at the center I need to see. Reluctantly, the pilot brought the helicopter lower, passing directly over the main spiral of water. Amara pressed her face to the window, straining to see what lay beneath the surface. At first, she saw nothing but darkness. Then, as the spotlight from the helicopter swept across the water, she glimpsed movement shapes moving beneath the surface. Hundreds of them, all converging on the central point. My God, whispered the technician beside her. Are those people down there? Before Amara could respond, the helicopter lurched violently as something struck its undercarriage. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as the aircraft tilted dangerously. We've got a problem, the pilot announced, fighting the controls. Something's wrong with the rotors. We need to set down immediately. Not near the water, Amara urged. Land as far from it as possible. The pilot managed to bring the damaged helicopter down on a ridge overlooking the new lake, a quarter-mile from the shore. As emergency crews rushed to evacuate them, Amara remained at the ridge's edge, studying the water through binoculars. What she saw defied rational explanation. The spiral patterns were more pronounced now, visible even in the limited light. At regular intervals, the water would surge upward in unnatural spouts, then collapse back with mathematical precision. And around the edges of this new body of water, smaller puddles were forming and moving, advancing across the desert floor, against gravity, connecting to the main body like tributaries returning to a river. Dr. Jefferson called one of the emergency responders. We need to evacuate you now. The situation is becoming unstable. Amara reluctantly turned away from her observation. As she did, a flicker of movement caught her eye, a small figure standing at the water's edge, barely visible in the darkness. A child, she realized with alarm, dressed in what appeared to be old-fashioned clothing. There's someone down there? She shouted, pointing. A child near the water. The emergency team swung their spotlights toward where she indicated, but the beam revealed only empty shoreline. The child had vanished, if they had ever been there at all. During the drive back to the emergency command center, Amara received another text from Michael, found Rachel's research files. The water is collecting again. It needs a new vessel. Back at the command center, Governor Reyes was waiting with a team of state officials and federal representatives. The atmosphere was tense, with multiple agencies attempting to claim jurisdiction over the bizarre hydrological event. Dr. Jefferson, the governor, acknowledged her. Your assessment, please. In terms a politician can understand, Amara hesitated, aware of how her professional reputation might suffer if she voiced her growing suspicions. The water from Clearwater Reservoir appears to be relocating to the abandoned Horizon mining site through means we haven't yet identified. The new formation shows extremely high levels of the same contaminants found in the original Coyote Wells incident in the 1880s. Is this an environmental crisis or a structural engineering failure? Demanded the FEMA representative. Amara chose her words carefully. I believe it's something else entirely. Something that might be better understood through historical context than current hydrological models. The room fell silent at Amara's statement. She took a deep breath and continued. There's a historical pattern here that cannot be ignored. From the original Coyote Wells contamination in the 1880s to the Horizon mining disaster in 2018. And now this event, we're seeing water behave in ways that defy conventional science. What exactly are you suggesting, Dr. Jefferson? The governor asked, her expression guarded. I'm suggesting that we consider all possibilities, including those documented by historians who studied the Coyote Wells incidents. Amara pulled out her tablet and displayed the historical map Michael had sent her. The contamination has followed a consistent pattern for nearly 150 years, appearing and disappearing through supposedly disconnected water systems. So we have groundwater channels that weren't properly mapped, suggested the Army Corps of Engineers representative. That's concerning, but hardly supernatural. Then explain why the water is moving against gravitational gradient, Amara challenged. Or why it's concentrating contaminants rather than diluting them. Or why every major incident has been preceded by unexplained water phenomena in nearby locations. She showed them photographs of the mysterious puddles that had been appearing throughout government buildings in Phoenix over the past week, puddles that maintenance crews could never trace to any source. Dr. Chun's sister was researching these connections before her death, Amara explained. She believed the original contamination fundamentally altered the properties of the groundwater in ways we don't yet understand. This sounds like pseudoscience, scoffed the FEMA representative. Perhaps, Amara conceded. But I saw something at the site tonight that I cannot explain with current hydrological models. The water is moving with purpose, forming patterns that appear almost designed. Before anyone could respond, an aide rushed into the room. Governor, we're getting reports of water emergencies throughout the Phoenix metro area. Household taps running yellow water, unexplained flooding in buildings with no active water lines, and multiple cases of sudden illness with symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning. The governor's face paled. How widespread? Initially concentrated in neighborhoods near the old Coyote Wells watershed, but spreading rapidly. Hospital emergency rooms are being overwhelmed. Amara exchanged a grim look with Michael, who had joined them at the command center. It's happening again, she said quietly, but on a much larger scale. Dawn broke over Phoenix, revealing a city in crisis. Emergency vehicles clogged the streets as residents fled neighborhoods where water had become a deadly threat. Hospitals had set up triage tents and parking lots to handle the influx of patients showing symptoms of heavy metal poisoning, bleeding gums, yellowed eyes, confusion, and in the most severe cases, violent seizures. Mara stood in the emergency operations center, studying the map where red pins indicated water-related incidents. The pattern was unmistakable now, a spiral radiating outward from the newly formed lake at the abandoned Horizon mining site, following underground channels that officially didn't exist. The contamination has reached the municipal water supply, confirmed the public health director. We've shut down the affected treatment plants, but thousands were exposed before we detected it. How is this possible? Demanded Governor Reyes. The mining site is miles from any municipal intake. It's moving through the aquifer, Amara explained, but not according to normal hydrological patterns. It's as if the water itself is seeking new pathways. She hesitated before adding, or perhaps following very old ones. Michael approached with his laptop. I've been analyzing my sister's research. She mapped every instance of what she called water memory events dating back to the original Coyote Wells. Contamination. He displayed a timeline spanning 140 years. There's a clear cyclical pattern. Approximately every 30 to 35 years, the contamination resurfaces, claims new victims, then goes dormant again. Claims victims? The FEMA director questioned skeptically. People go missing, Michael clarified, usually those already showing symptoms of poisoning. The official reports cite drowning, disorientation, or flash flooding, but the bodies are rarely recovered. Amara studied the pattern. The last major cycle would have been the Horizon incident in 2018. Why is it happening again so soon? Rachel believed each cycle required a certain volume of contaminated water to activate, Michael explained. The Clearwater Reservoir provided more water at once than any previous event, possibly triggering a premature cycle. This is absurd, the FEMA director interjected. We're discussing water as if it has agency. Do you have a better explanation for what we're observing? Amara challenged. Because I've spent my career studying water systems, and nothing in my training explains what's happening now. The debate was interrupted by a technician monitoring water quality sensors. Dr. Jefferson, you need to see this. The contamination levels in the municipal system are dropping rapidly. That's good news, isn't it? Asked the governor. It would be, Amara said slowly, if we knew where the contaminants were going. A terrible suspicion formed in her mind. Check the new lake at the mining site. What are the readings there? After a moment, the technician reported, concentrations are increasing exponentially. It's as if all the contaminated water is being drawn back to the source. Not back to the source, Michael corrected grimly. Back to the vessel. It's collecting. Amara made a sudden decision. I need to see it. The central point where everything is converging. That's too dangerous, the governor protested. We've established a 5-mile evacuation zone around that site. Someone has to document what's happening, Amara insisted. Someone with the scientific background to understand it. 3 hours later. Amara stood at the ridge overlooking the new lake, now swollen to twice its previous size. The spiral patterns were clearly visible, even from a distance, rotating slowly around the central shaft like a massive liquid whirlpool. The air carried a metallic taste, and despite the hazmat suit she wore, Amara's gums had begun to tingle ominously. Michael had insisted on accompanying her, driven by the need to validate his sister's research. They carefully made their way down the ridge, environmental sensors recording every aspect of the phenomenon. The water level is still rising, Michael observed, but the contamination is being concentrated rather than diluted. It defies the basic principles of fluid dynamics. As they approached the shoreline, Amara noticed something disturbing. Small footprints in the mud, leading both toward and away from the water. Children's footprints, though no children had been reported in the evacuation zone. Michael, she said quietly, do you see those? He followed her gaze, his expression grim. Rachel documented the same phenomenon at the Horizon site in 2018, and at multiple locations throughout the historical record. Amara knelt to examine the footprints more closely. They were unnaturally clear in the mud, as if recently made. Yet there was a strange quality to them. The impressions seemed deeper than a child's weight should create. Look, Michael whispered suddenly, pointing toward the water's edge. A small figure stood at the shoreline some 50 yards away, a girl in what appeared to be a white nightgown, her dark hair hanging loose around her shoulders. Even from a distance, Amara could see something was wrong with her face. Her mouth appeared unnaturally dark against her pale skin. Hello? Amara called, instinctively taking a step toward the child. Are you lost? This area isn't safe. The girl turned slowly to face them, revealing blackened gums and discolored teeth in a grotesque parody of a smile. The water sent me to find you, she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the distance. It knows you've been studying its patterns, just like the other woman. Michael inhaled sharply. Emma Thompson, he whispered. From the original Coyote Wells incidents. Rachel described her exactly. That's impossible, Amara murmured, though the evidence before her eyes challenged everything she believed about reality. The water remembers, the girl continued, taking a step toward them. It holds us all within it, everyone who's been poisoned since the beginning. And now it's time for the final gathering. Behind Emma, the lake's surface began to change. Faces appeared in the water, dozens, then hundreds of them, looking up from beneath the surface. Men, women, and children from different eras, all bearing the same marks of poisoning. Blackened gums, yellowed eyes, skin mottled with toxins. My sister, Michael gasped. She's there. Amara followed his gaze to see a woman's face among the others, her features distorted by the water yet recognizably similar to Michael's. Rachel. Chun looked up at her brother with hollow eyes, her mouth moving in words they couldn't hear. She tried to warn everyone, Emma said, now standing just yards away, though Amara hadn't seen her move. But they wouldn't listen. They never listen until the water claims them. What does it want? Amara asked, scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her fear. Justice, Emma replied simply. For what was done to the earth, to the water, to us. The poison they put in the ground for profit took our lives. Now we take theirs. Behind the girl, the water began to rise, forming a massive wave that defied gravity, towering over the shoreline without breaking. Within it, the faces became more distinct, thousands of victims from nearly 150 years of contamination, all watching with hollow eyes. Run, Michael urged, grabbing Amara's arm. We need to get to higher ground. But as they turned, they found puddles forming in the desert around them, perfect circles of yellowish water emerging from the dry earth, cutting off their escape. The circles expanded and connected, surrounding them with contaminated water that moved with apparent purpose. "The water has chosen you," Emma informed them matter-of-factly, "to tell the final story, to ensure we aren't forgotten again." The massive wave behind her remained suspended, defying physics as it hung poised above the shoreline. The faces within it watched expectantly, waiting. "What do you mean?" Amara asked, trying to maintain scientific detachment even as panic threatened to overwhelm her. "Someone must remember," Emma explained. "Someone must warn. Just as Martha Lynch warned, as Catherine Thompson warned, as Rachel Chun warned." She extended a small, pale hand. "Touch the water. See what it remembers. Then you'll understand." Michael stepped forward, his expression resolute. "I'll do it for Rachel." "Michael, no," Amara protested. But he had already reached toward Emma's outstretched hand. As their fingers met, the suspended wave finally broke, rushing toward them with impossible speed. The last thing Amara saw before the water engulfed them was Michael's expression transforming from fear to understanding as the knowledge of the water's memory flowed into him. The contaminated wave receded as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving Amara alone on the shore, drenched but unharmed. Michael and Emma had vanished, along with the faces in the water. The lake had returned to an ordinary surface, though the spiral patterns remained visible from her perspective. In the mud at her feet lay a leather-bound journal, Rachel Chun's research, somehow preserved despite the deluge. Beside it was a handwritten note in unfamiliar script. "The cycle is complete. The vessel is filled. The water will rest now for a time, but the poison remains in the earth, put there by human greed, and the water never forgets. When it rises again, remember our warning. Don't trust the water. We are still here." Amara gathered the journal with trembling hands and began the long walk back to civilization, already composing in her mind the scientific paper that no reputable journal would ever publish, a paper documenting the hydrological properties of water with memory. Water with purpose. Water that collected the poisoned souls of those it had claimed across nearly a century and a half of human negligence. Behind her, the new lake, now still and seemingly ordinary, reflected the Arizona sun. Beneath its placid surface, thousands of faces watched her departure with patient eyes, their vigil unending, their warning preserved in the memory of the water itself. And in Phoenix, as municipal systems returned to normal and the crisis subsided, residents reported an unexplained phenomenon in homes throughout the city. Taps briefly running with yellowed water that disappeared before it could be tested, and words appearing in condensation on bathroom mirrors. "Don't trust the water. We are still here.